All right, everybody. So we are back on the show with a guest this time. We had Justin Giefer before is the last interview, which everybody can listen to if you haven't yet. Good conversation. And now we're here with Rosie Tran in New York City. And it's been, what, you said 12 years since our last
12 years.
recorded conversation. And your assistant reached out to me and asked for a copy of an interview that we had done way back when. And I don't usually keep stuff from that long ago. I'm not a big hoarder of past interviews and stuff. Anything that's online, obviously, I'll be able to link people to. But something that way back I just don't have archives of. And I said, why don't we just meet up when you're in New York and record something new for people? And here we are. It's amazing how time passes. When you're super old like we are, you can say something in the distant future.
Well,
and then it comes up on you overnight practically,
I remember, what happened is I've been on a bunch of podcasts with really big people or people that were nobodies who became really big people. And I'm like, I wonder if I have a copy of that podcast. And I've been on podcasts with some people that have, become some of the most famous people in the world. And I don't have copies of those podcasts. And I go, oh gosh. So I had her reach out to all of the podcasts I've been on. And surprisingly, a lot of people did have archives. And a lot of them, the ones that I was hoping to have, were all erased. So
wow.
Yeah, but that's okay. I just wanted it for me, just like as nostalgia, but also to post on my YouTube page. But I'm very excited to reconnect with you.
Yeah, no, it's good to see you again. And I got these emails from my high school alumni association for many years, and they were all so pretentious. Some of the recent updates, you would think these people were like Mark Zuckerberg or something. It's very pretentious, kind of self-important updates about their little achievements in the world.
Well, that's funny. So I was actually not invited to my high school reunion. I had a high school reunion, a big one, a 20-year reunion 2 years ago. And I was in town and nobody invited me. I got a text from one of my good friends. She goes, "Where are you?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Why aren't you here?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Oh my God, you should be here. You're one of the most accomplished people out of everyone in our high school." I'm like, "Well, I wasn't invited." So, but she said it was basically a brag fest of people trying to, one up each other, which is sad.
Yeah. Well, no offense to my high school, but I think that an alumni association for your high school is just really like self-important, because I feel like college is where you're actually mentally an adult to some extent. Right, you're like legally drinking, you're talking about philosophy and science with total strangers, and you're living in dorms. And that's when you can actually harken back to, I had a roommate who really stimulated me intellectually.
Yeah.
Like in high school, you're just learning stuff and going home on a bus.
You're not really an adult or a person. Yeah.
So, let's do one where you kind of give us a roadmap of where you were when we last talked and where you are now.
Oh, wow. So I always feel like I haven't accomplished a super bunch, but then, in hindsight, when you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, I've done so much. So when I met you, I think I was still in my 20s. Does that add that up? Late 20s. And I was doing comedy in Los Angeles. That I'm still doing comedy in Los Angeles, but since then I've done a lot. I started a production company. I produced my first feature film, which is in post-production. I had a comedy special, half-hour comedy special in NBC. So I've done quite a bit since then. And I really actually owe you a lot, David.
Why is that?
Because you were one of the people to get me into crypto. And I have a podcast. It's kind of halfway defunct, called Hello Crypto Kitty 2.0 on Rockfin. I had one of the first crypto podcasts with my friend Esther Crew called Crypto Kitties, and we talked about Ethereum. And I was already into crypto, but I just kept getting overwhelmed with a lot of the jargon and feeling really just confused by it. I'm mostly a Bitcoin, Ethereum person. There's a few altcoins that I like, but I'm not super into that many altcoins. But you were talking about Ethereum on your newsletter quite a bit. And I just felt really confused by it. And I felt like you talking about it and a few other people talking about it was able to get me through the crypto jargon that a lot of the crypto bros were pushing back then, because it was really, really, really technical. Now, obviously, it's a lot more mainstream, not as mainstream as I wish it was, but it was just very niche.
Mm-hmm. So I helped popularize it, and you were one of the people who could see there was something there beyond all the jargon and techno talk.
I feel like there was a lot of jargon and techno talk. I felt like a lot of crypto people were kind of self-masturbatorily saying, hey, we're smarter than you. And I didn't like that, because it did make me feel stupid. And I think crypto is something that's very, very important, but it's not super complicated once you break it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there was a lot of early self-masturbatory, I'm a smart crypto person and you're an idiot because you don't know about this next huge thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you have a decentralized technology, nobody is in charge of the marketing. And I think after the first couple of cycles, you get this megalomania from people who are just kind of like crazy nerds. And they stumbled onto the gold rush. And so some people did very well from that and maintained psychologically. I think some people really kind of sailored out and became these like larger than life human beings, or tried to. And even before the valuations made like any sense in terms of the level of arrogance, you had people who thought that they were like the world's answer to 1,000 years of deep state rule. And they walked around accordingly. And it's a huge achievement. It's a huge invention. And in retrospect, I'm totally happy that my random walk through the podcast forest led me to crypto. It really did.
Is that how you got into it?
I was doing this hapless political podcast in South Florida, and someone said, you should have these Bitcoin guys on. And I did like a little search for what Bitcoin was. And I was like, oh, that seems interesting. It seems like a clever little solution to PayPal or whatever. I wasn't like thrilled with it, right? I wasn't like super excited, but I was like, oh, that seems like a really interesting innovation. So I booked Trace Mayer. I haven't talked to him in more than a decade, but booked Trace Mayer, who was one of the earliest people into Bitcoin. And then I had a podcast interview with Roger Ver, and everybody knows who he is.
Yes.
Another person I haven't talked to in many years, I've had no contact with. But way back when, these two individuals, I think it was the combination of them, just listening to them over an audio interview. I shouldn't say I never, because years later I actually saw Roger in person in Aspen and talked to him for a couple minutes. But aside from that, these were like remote audio interviews, and just the crazy strength of it made sense to me back then. And this was maybe a day or two after interviewing, I think it was Trace Mayer. I was in my shower in South Florida in my condo. And like, you know, sometimes like thoughts come to you when you're taking a shower, at least for me. I think I was pretty high at the time, but this really hot shower was hitting my back. And that was like my being pulled out of the Matrix, jar. That was my moment where I was like, wow, this could theoretically be like 50% of the economy. And I realized that way back when. And then I wasn't really a proselytizer of it. It only came up on my YouTube channel because I was genuinely interested in it at that point. And so the people in my life, like my father and other people close to me, I was just like, you need to be getting into this right now. And they're like, we'll look into it. I'm like, no, like literally right now. Like you need to be wiring money and getting some Bitcoin today. I was the Michael Saylor of a decade ago, I guess. But the world is more complicated now, and with AI and quantum computing and some other stuff, and advancements in space travel, I feel like it's a whole dartboard. It's no longer just crypto. You can find arrogant nerds anywhere. And if they seem really confident, you can arbitrage that. You can arbitrage that confidence, and you can discern which craps table is going to come in to some extent. And some people are really great at raising families, and other people are good at starting businesses. And some people are great podcast personalities. And some people are actually great at betting. And I think that was my gift. Like, I picked the wrong career. I thought I was a journalist. But some people are just great at picking the right racehorse, and it can't leave you no matter how hard you try or how much you drink or like how many neurons you kill. If you know how to pick the right racehorse, it can't really leave you. It's both a curse and a gift. And Bitcoin, again, below $2 billion market cap. I was telling everybody I cared about, like, you need to be removing money from your bank account and putting it into Bitcoin now, after my shower epiphany.
Yeah.
And but no, I want to hear your journey beyond that. So that was, Ethereum was for you very early experience.
So Bitcoin and Ethereum. I mean, I was looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum very early on. Bitcoin was, the white paper was 2009.
Mm-hmm.
About 2011, I was looking into it. I believe the price was like 500 or 1,000, but I was too scared. At that point, I was too scared and too, I don't want to say dumb. I just was too overwhelmed by the information. I was like, this information is, I remember finding a New York Times article that said Bitcoin is dead. Mm-hmm. And the article was about how Bitcoin had gone up to $100 and it had crashed down to $10 and it's dead. And I think it went up to 5,000 and I was like, okay, I need to get in. So at that point I got into Bitcoin, and also there was a lot of like Silk Road drama. Really, I was scared of the government. I was scared that if I invested a large chunk of money into Bitcoin, that the government was going to repossess it, because at that time they were doing repossessions. I don't know if you remember that. They were repossessing Bitcoin from people that were causing problems. They were making examples of people. They were arresting people. They were, there was a lot of tax vagary happening at the time. There's still tax vagary with crypto. So I wanted to put in more money, like a lot more money. I had some money in savings and I had other money that I was like, where should I invest this? And I was just too scared of the government, which is horrible. I mean, that just shows how much we need a decent centralized currency and other things like that, that I was scared the government was going to take my assets. And it wasn't because I was doing anything shady or illegal. It was because they seemed very, very, very anti-Bitcoin.
I think even up until December, Biden December as I call it, the government had a very kind of aggressive stance toward cryptocurrency. And I'm not sure who told them to do that, because years ago it was different in the sense that it seemed like the IRS recognized it and they had given some early guidance, which of course changed over time. But they were engaged with the community. And then under Biden, although the price actually went up a lot, you had this view that like tomorrow it could be outlawed. And whatever you want to say about Trump, there's no longer any legitimate fear of it being outlawed.
Correct. It's so tough for me because I do have a lot of reservations about him. But the fact that his administration is pro-crypto was so huge for me. Like, I felt a sigh of relief because a lot of people in the DNC seem to be extremely anti-crypto to their own detriment. What I mean is that what they were preaching that they were for, they were against it through crypto. So, Liz Warren saying that she's for the little guy, that she's, very pro, whatever. And then being so anti-stablecoin, it just didn't make any logical sense. And then you find out that she's sponsored by so many big banks and, that she makes so much money from Wall Street. And it just, I think there was like a link or something on her X. I don't even know if she's still on X because a lot of people have gotten off X since Elon took over. But it was Twitter, and there was something on her Twitter that she had posted to that she was very pro regarding, she was very anti-stablecoin. And I clicked on the article that she had linked to, and it was like this Wall Street guy. And I kind of did some light internet digging, like not even that crazy internet digging. And I linked her to that guy, and he was like a hedge fund guy. And just like with like a couple of clicks and like Googles and stuff. And it just made me lose so much heart and so much faith because I had really, really, really liked Liz Warren. And I kind of, I've changed politically quite a bit. I'm more libertarian leaning, more independent leaning. But at that time, I was more left leaning. And I really liked her. And it really kind of soured me and made me feel depressed. Like, wow, like she's bought.
Right.
And crypto is really what woke me up to a lot of things because there was no reason for some of these people to be so against it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Liz Warren came across as this progressive, and then it comes out she's so against crypto. And as I've said for listeners who already, are subscribed and stuff, this will be the 1,000th time they've heard it. But there's nothing more progressive than Bitcoin. There's nothing more progressive than a decentralized alternative to the banks.
It's money for the people.
Right, it's money for the people, but it's also like, so for many years, left-leaning progressives supported credit unions as an alternative to the big banks. And it's like, well, this is a quantum leap better than a credit union because you're actually using a neutral currency. You're not just going to the Fed and then like operating on worse terms than a big bank could because you don't have the numbers. Exactly. You're actually jumping out and using a whole different currency, and the settlement layer is 100% online, so you don't need little bank branches, little tellers.
You're your own bank. You are your own bank. It's weird. It's like pure capitalism, but also pure socialism in a weird way. I feel like it's like, you know how they say if you go so far to the left or right, it kind of turns into a circle. It's kind of that, but in a positive way, if that makes any sense. It's not, whereas the Fed is like pure socialism in an evil way because it's a central banking system. So it just doesn't make any sense to me if you understand the basics of crypto, why you would be against it in any way, shape, or form, unless you like owned a bank or you owned a hedge fund. Like, I don't understand why you would be against it.
It's a voluntary asset, whereas the dollar is not. Right?
It's not, and it's backed by blood money, and it's backed by the war machine, and it's backed by the petrodollar. I mean,
so you come into the world, right? Somebody bears you into this world in America today, and the U.S. dollar is your default currency. Somebody's already selected it from a drop-down menu the second you're born, and you can't opt out. U.S. dollar. So then when you turn 18, you can rack up millions of dollars of debt, and you can become a debt slave for life. And yet nobody's let you opt in. It's just that's the default, right? Of course, the upside is you can make a lot of money. But with Bitcoin, it's actually voluntary. There's no negative Bitcoin, right? We're not a debtor nation state. We aren't trying to enslave people with debt. The least you can have is 0 Bitcoin. Right? There's no like, oh, I have a negative 100 Bitcoin balance. It's just not possible. Whereas the dollar is built to maintain debt. It's literally how it works, right? If you were to take away people's credit cards, there would be no stock market because people would stop buying iPhones, and then Apple would collapse and everybody else would collapse.
Well, that's what got me also waking up about the mainstream media, because crypto was such a niche thing back then still, and the lies that were told about it were insane. Like insane. There was an opinion piece, but still it was written as if it was an article, a legitimate journalistic article, that basically said Bitcoin is bad for Black people. And I showed it to my husband and he's like, it doesn't say that. I said, look. And he started laughing. It was so bad. And the article was written by a Wall Street person. It was written by someone who was a broker for a big bank, one of the big 4 banks. I mean, talk about conflict of interest, but it was written and presented as if it was a legitimate journalistic article, the way it was laid out on the page and everything like that. And that's patently false. That's not true at all. And then the data that they used, I did a quick search on some of this, because they quoted statistics. Like I said, it looked very professional. Mm-hmm. And I looked at some of the statistics that they quoted, and it was such cherry-picked nonsense. They talked about how volatile it was. They talked about how you could lose all of your money. And they picked a very small sample of like extreme altcoins, like weird coins like cum coin or butt coin or whatever, some like weird meme coins. And they just showed how it was like down 1,000,000% or some extreme amount. And then they compared it to the S&P and like traditional investing, right, which obviously gains an average of 10% a year over year. And then they talked about how people who can only really make money in crypto if you're like super rich, and the people that tend to invest are white males, which is true, but that's not because white males have more money. It's because most of the crypto bros and crypto nerds were white male programmers. And it's not about, because as you said, crypto can be accessed by anyone. It's more about education than, any type of inequality or disparity. And so I think the article was just really, really, it just was so insane. It was so insane how cherry-picked the information was and the data was and how it was presented as real news. And I just kept seeing that time after time, article after article from Washington Post, from New York Times saying, crypto is just the devil's come. And it was just like, are you guys really being this extreme? Like, this is insane.
Well, now we see with this US AID thing that's coming out, where Elon Musk is cutting all this funding. We see that the media in large part was literally funded through USAID, which is part of the federal government. And so a lot of these anti-crypto articles from up to a month ago, and a lot of these anti-cannabis legalization articles, it should be noted that Joe Biden had 4 years to legalize weed, and he and Kamala both promised to do it, and they never did it. That's how owned the Democrat Party is at the moment. This is one thing where they could have actually gained some easy brownie points, and they didn't do it in 4 effing years. Could have done it at any time, and saved so many people, especially many minorities, from being put into the meat grinder of, in the wrong states, still being incarcerated. People in North Carolina still being incarcerated. People in the Deep South still being incarcerated over a plant that you can buy on the street here in New York City. Not on the street, street shops. Like legally,
It's
you can
legal.
walk in. Same as buying a beer. It's literally that easy. And this is the center of America aside from DC. It's here in DC is really the center of America. And Los Angeles had the media grid for a long time. It's still an influential place. But it's like when you think of what the U.S. is, New York is still one of those cities, and you can just buy it.
It's one of the cities of the world.
Yeah, exactly. So it's available here, and Biden could have legalized it, and he did not. So we're still on a very uneven, unfair situation in the U.S., where if you're in the wrong state, it can ruin your life. And I recently learned that Housing and Urban Development, HUD, HUD, since they're a federal government agency, anybody who rents, which tend to be lower income people, right? Anybody who rents have to abide by federal guidelines, which means that if you're renting a condo or an apartment for your family and they find weed in the apartment, even if it's medical marijuana that's been licensed to you in your state, they can cancel your lease immediately and F you to the max because they're reporting to the federal government. That's something Biden could have fixed in a minute. He didn't, It's just a crazy situation that if you're in a state that has medical marijuana, they can take away your home because it's linked in with HUD. That to me is just like insane.
I mean, I feel like there's just been so much misinformation out there, and it's insane. It was printed by liberal media outlets that, Biden pre-pardoned unconditionally his entire family. That's scary. That's really scary. No person should be pre-pardoned for crime.
Yeah.
They haven't allegedly committed any crimes yet.
It's like the Minority Report in reverse.
It's minority.
We're predicting what you're going to be guilty of, and we're going to free you from it.
And nobody. So does that mean his family can just go kill people? Like, what have they done? And again, it's just insanity, and it was reported on, but obviously very, not part of the mainstream zeitgeist. It was reported on so that it's out there and they can say, look, we did it.
Right.
But it was not a big story. I mean, if Trump pre-pardoned his entire family for pre-crime, do you know how crazy the media would go over that?
No, you're right. It's a story the media gave very white glove treatment to. And any other administration, you're totally correct. If it were even George Bush way back when, they would have gone nuts if he had pardoned all these criminals as he walks out the door. All these criminals who helped out the administration.
Well, we don't know if they're criminals because they haven't done anything yet, so who knows?
Again, it's Minority Report in reverse. They're figuring out what you're going to do so they can liberate you from the consequences of it.
It's really sad because, I was more left-leaning for many, many years, but I left, I left. I just felt so disillusioned, and I feel like I'm a little bit in the closet. I mean, my family knows I'm libertarian, but I feel like I'm in the closet about being libertarian because there's such a extreme far-right stereotype of libertarians, like the guys with the tiki torches, like neo-Nazis and stuff like that. And all the libertarians I've ever met have been amazing people, freedom-loving, liberty-loving people. But it's such a minority political party, and I think that there's a stereotype that it is far-right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's media outlets that were funded by USAIDs, as it's called on Twitter. So media outlets funded by USAIDs that were deciding which of us are far right. And even if you voted 99% of the time for the Democrats, they can label you far right or even a Nazi on their own sole determination. And obviously, if you're Kanye West and you're walking around with a swastika t-shirt, So it might be hard to win a defamation lawsuit if that's what the media calls you. It might be a little bit difficult. But no, they've certainly labeled people erroneously as stuff that they have nothing to do with.
Well, that's all you have to do. You just have to say Nazi like 10 times. And, they had the Republican National Convention in New York, and they just kept calling it Nazi rally, Nazi rally, Nazi rally. Mm-hmm. And I heard friends echoing, the Nazi rally. It's the RNC convention.
Yeah.
It's not a Nazi rally. They're not waving Nazi flags around. It's not a Nazi rally. If you look at the audience, there's black people there, there's Hispanic people there. I mean, Hispanic people overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. And I have friends saying, well, I don't understand how a minority could, if you're Latino, you could vote for Trump. What are you talking about? The majority of these people have escaped socialist and leftist regimes. What?
The left is totally off base, even to this day, on...
It's insanity.
On the Latino community, and that, if you're talking about Cuban Americans like Marco Rubio...
Overwhelmingly conservative.
Overwhelmingly, exactly.
And they're just, they don't understand.
Legal immigrants are a thing. That's what the left doesn't understand. Is there are people who've been here for 100 years, and yeah, they're Hispanic, but they're not threatened by immigration policy. And that's where that's one of the many areas where they miss the ball at the moment.
Not just that, it's like that Chris Rock joke. Chris Rock has a joke. He says, who hates a welfare queen? A single black mom who works 3 jobs. Right? And it's the same thing. Who hates an illegal immigrant? A legal immigrant who came here legally and filed their paperwork and waited 15 years.
Exactly. Nobody wants somebody jumping to the front of the line. It's just human nature.
Exactly. And actually, they've done studies on it, and the statistics that are the most anti-illegal immigration are other immigrants who are like, why did I have to stand in line and fill out all this paperwork and get my HB1 visa and do everything and hire an attorney, and you're just here and then you get asylum and you're staying in luxury hotels? That's not cool.
Yeah.
And so it's not these neo-Nazi, I'm using quotations, white men who are so anti-immigrant. A lot of the people who are anti-immigrant are immigrants.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have a lot of friends on the left who I love very dearly and who have a big heart and really want equality and justice and have good values, but I think that they're blind to what's happening in America right now. And I think a lot of people are waking up to some of the hypocrisy that's being promoted from the Democratic Party. And I personally, it sounds extreme, but I don't know if the Democratic Party is going to collapse. I mean, other parties have collapsed. The Whig Party, the Know Nothing Party, all these parties from the 1800s, many parties have collapsed. So I don't know if the Democratic Party is going to survive this. It was a pretty brutal blow, and I think younger people are going more Republican. A lot of people are going independent. 40% of Americans are actually independents, or don't vote. So I just think that, it's going to be a day of reckoning soon if they don't wake up from their woke sleep.
Yeah, they've doubled down on everything they were saying before the election, which is crazy. And so your whole strategy failed. So you think you would retool, and you've got 4 years to do it, or at least 2 years before midterms. And they're not doing it. Again, they're getting crazier.
They're getting crazier. It's really bad. They're just saying everyone's racist, everyone's an idiot, everyone's sexist, and that's it. And that's the bottom line. And everyone's brainwashed. I've heard that. Oh, yeah. Everyone's just brainwashed.
My second to last upload on YouTube, I was rebutting these leftoids, as I call them, who are starting to pop up in the comments. And I don't want to talk about Pizzagate anymore. And yet they're litigating this as if it happened yesterday, as if those emails came out yesterday. And they're like, well, don't you think this is actually just the tailwinds of the Iran-Contra scandal? And aren't you being a bad journalist by not seeing that? And I'm like, you're literally insane. You're trying to tie emails that came out in 2016 to the early, you're trying to tie a scandal that emerged in 2016 to the 1980s and Reagan and Iran-Contra. You're literally crazy people. You don't have to defend your political party to this extent. You lost. Now regroup and decide, why did you lose? And it was both the popular vote and the electoral vote. Not every American voted for Trump, obviously. But yeah, he definitely won. He definitely has a mandate to lead. And we'll see where he's at popularity-wise in 4 years. But again, these people, it's time to reevaluate. You fucking lost. And you're seeing the restructuring at MSNBC and stuff. It's people don't want to hear how bad Trump is after they just voted for him.
Exactly.
It's not genius level stuff. It's just basic marketing. People don't want to hear that they made the wrong choice when they literally just made their choice.
But also, his approval ratings are pretty high. People are really excited about Doge. They're really excited about all these billions and trillions of dollars that are being found.
Why would you not be excited? I think some people are scared that it's going to collapse the economy. And if our whole economy is based on sending money off for male circumcision in Mozambique and transgendering animals in Brussels. And
Don't forget about the knitting in the in Afghanistan.
If this is the bedrock of our economy, good God, we should restart from scratch. It should just be Bitcoin from here on out. Bitcoin and eBay, right? It's like just eBay becomes the new stock market. Like if that's really what's driving everything, are these scammy contracts, then let's restart from scratch. I don't care if my portfolio goes to zero. If that's really what it is, I'm out.
I also feel like people should be really excited that we've found all of this waste. Like there's all the dead people that are receiving multiple Social Security payments. I mean, and they're kind of like the whole Elon has our information, blah, 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 privacy. Nobody cared about privacy before this. I mean, do you know how many after 9/11, the Freedom of Information Act basically gutted individual privacy. And that was a Bush administration move, which sucks. But nobody cared about privacy then. And we've been talking about it. You know, Snowden talked about it. Glenn Greenwald talked about it, how they're just stealing our data. And nobody said anything. And then all of a sudden now Elon is, and everyone's like, oh, privacy, privacy. I'm like, you had a really long time to complain about this.
Yeah, no, it's another bogus argument, just like everything else, like the arguments against crypto years ago. It's totally bogus to say, aren't you concerned about your privacy? Elon Musk has no interest in me or you. He really doesn't.
He really doesn't.
He's going for the glory of reforming the federal government before it completely collapses.
Yes.
They're spending so much money they can either hyperinflate the dollar, in which case we all become poor, or it defaults. It becomes a bankrupt nation, which would become poor by another, outcome.
Yeah, and if you don't know what that means, it's like everyone's a billionaire in Mozambique. That's not a good thing.
Well, it's what you're looking at is like we could become the new Venezuela.
Yeah.
You'll have a super rich class who make money off the collapse, and everybody else is going to be miserable. And Elon Musk and other patriots, other outright patriots, have decided they're not going to allow this to happen. And are there going to be some mistakes made? Are they going to cancel some programs accidentally that maybe did some beneficial stuff? For sure, it's inevitable. But no, you shouldn't be afraid. If you're staying up at night because you're worried about Elon Musk looking through your finances, the world's richest man, like he's going to steal money from you when he's literally the world's richest man. Also, if you're concerned about him, you're a shady person.
The arguments about Elon enriching himself are, I'm probably going to get canceled for this, delusional, and it's such a poor person's thinking. And the reason I say that is because once you reach a certain level of wealth, you don't care about money anymore. I know that's really hard for people to understand, but what happens is you're doing it for ego. You're doing it for pride, because they've done multiple studies on this. A $10 million lifestyle is the same as a $100 million lifestyle, right? Jeff Bezos can only fly on such a giant private jet. Right. Or go to, if Jeff Bezos goes to Hawaii, he goes to the same Hawaii you and me go to. There's not a special Hawaii just for Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean? It's the same thing as like buying a Ferrari. If you buy a Ferrari, you still have to drive on the same freaking freeway as me and you. You don't get a special highway just for you.
Why do billionaires like the Google founders, when they want to get time away from everything, why do they come here to New York City to wait in line at some bar that smells like ass? or be pushed around to get like some shitty beer and some fake Irish pub? Why do they fly here? Again, like you're saying, they could be in Hawaii. Yeah. They come here because like ultimately you want to interact with people, and a beer is $5. Even if you're a poor person or a billionaire, it's the same beer. We're all recording on the same phones, etc. So you're right. There's been this like lateralization of what is prosperity.
Well, there's also this delusion that because you're a super rich person, you're not a human being anymore. You're not a person because you're evil now. You're an evil rich billionaire, so you have no emotions. No, you're still run by the same operating system as every other person. And that operating system, once you have more than enough finances, there's no thrill to it. So people that are like, he's just doing it to enrich themselves, that is such a poor person's way of thinking. He doesn't care about money. I know that like people cannot understand that. When you're that rich, you actually don't care about money. It is psychologically proven. Why would Elon Musk have a different psychology than every single other human being? The things that you're driven by after a certain level of wealth are ego ambition, pride, self-actualization.
Right. No, he wants people to think that he's a patriot.
Exactly.
In
That's what I'm saying.
50 years, he wants the textbooks to say, and Elon Musk saved the American
Exactly.
government. Saved the American government from financial collapse.
And that's what people don't understand. And again, I'm not making stuff up. Go read a Psychology 101 textbook. This is basic psychology. And so everyone who complains he's just trying to enrich himself to get richer and richer, again, that goes against basic human psychology and the way we're wired. So it's just something that drives me insane because it's like a tropey thing that sounds true. Oh, he's greedy, he's rich. But if you actually look at basic human psychology, that's not how we work.
Right.
Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
Yeah, and also it's like not everybody's built the same way. You don't have to scrape every dollar off the strip club floor of life, as I like to say on the podcast. I've said this a couple times. Like, you don't have to be that person. Now, if you're built in such a way that you're just brilliant with money, and you always make great trades and stuff, you want to be some like Ken Griffin, right? So you want to be the next Soros, the next Ken Griffin. Fine. Most people are not built that way, and that's okay too. You don't have to maximize your life for money. And I think you're right that once a person reaches a certain amount of money, unless they're very strange, unless they really like to sit at the abacus at night. And
I don't think he's doing that.
Most people are not motivated by more money. Specifically.
He's motivated by success. He's motivated by wanting to do the right thing. Why? How do I know? Because he has 10 companies and he's also constantly live tweeting every 5 minutes. So he actually doesn't have time to care about money because he's got 10 kids, 5 baby mamas, 20 companies, and he's live tweeting. So he doesn't have time to be greedy mentally.
So speaking of time, we're almost out of it today, but the gist of your last 10 years, you came to crypto early.
Yes.
And then that allowed you to focus more on your comedy career or your family or travel, or how did it work out for you?
Yeah, so I did well in crypto. Obviously not as well as I would have liked to. Everyone thinks I'm like a billionaire because I, got in really early, but that's not the case because you still have to put in a bunch of money early. And like I said, I was really scared the government was going to repossess. So I did do well. Not so well that I'm, living the high life and, completely retired or anything like that. But I did do really well so that I had a little cushion. And so, and I'm grateful for you for introducing me to Ethereum. So I'll say that. So I did do well so that I don't have to be insanely stressed. And I have been focused more on comedy and starting my production company and doing projects and things like that. So I started a production company called Fire Couple Productions with my hubby. And we produced a feature film with Biling and Jake Busey in it. That's in post-production right now. It should be out in the next year. We produced a couple comedy pilots and projects for friends. And I just was able to pivot more into, I think, a little bit faster than everyone usually works a day job and waits to quote unquote make it big. Mm-hmm. But I was able to pivot a little bit sooner. So I'm not, flying on private jets, but I'm definitely very comfortable mm-hmm. and happy with my little savings. So I really am excited that I got in early.
That's great. Yeah, I think for people who are intuitive or lucky or just very ahead of the curve, crypto coming in was like a universal basic income before the universal basic income.
Yeah.
It was a little taste of the UBI that may be ahead because we got so I really do have to end this one in a couple minutes. I got something at 7, but I was thinking recently about how some people are very smart and are mostly pro-America and good on everything, have this really weird bent against cognitive rights. And even Trump or somebody close to Trump has said something about how if we enact the death penalty for dealing drugs, it would get rid of so many problems. Because as Trump says, one drug dealer is responsible for at least 500 deaths. So is that really so inhumane? Yes, it is. That's the answer, right? It's we're getting in this weird zone where we treat people as if they're cogs in the machine or just these discrete units you can move around. And Sam Hyde had a video that took off recently. It went viral, responding to some of Elon Musk's views on immigration. And you see these kind of American intellectuals saying, wait a second, we're actually human beings. We actually have rights. It's kind of the whole point of our country, right, is the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. It was literally founded as a country where adult male citizens and now adult female citizens, that was an early injustice, actually have rights. It's not a privilege. It's not a possibility. You have a fucking right to certain things, like your free speech and your right to privacy and so on, right? And like, something weird is happening where people are like, why would you want to get high? Why would you want to get drunk for that matter? We should have a new prohibition. If you're served alcohol, we should be able to execute you. And it's like, hang on a second. I know you want an efficient economy. I know you want no more crime. I know you don't want people brawling at bars or people having, sex irresponsibly that leads to reproduction without marriage. I realize you want all these noble things, but we're actually human beings. We're not fucking robots. And there's a lot of evidence that for some people anyways, experimenting with cannabis or even with quote unquote harder drugs like ketamine is actually doing something really profound where these people are able to think in a higher way. And now we have AI that'll come up with stuff for us. But I think to even be able to fully grasp what AI is starting to tell us, you need to have cognitive freedom. Like some of what ChatGPT even comes up with is so wild that it might be better to have a few puffs of a joint. and either way, aren't we human beings? Like the founding fathers all drank beer. There's pretty significant historical speculation that they were potheads, but they all drank beer. They owned tobacco farms. They smoked tobacco all the time because nicotine is actually a pseudo-nootropic, according to some people. Helps you think better, right? And like we have to push back against this weird Silicon Valley. There's a Silicon Valley / conservative like movement against just being a free person. Just literally, if you're an adult and you pay your taxes and your lawn is clear, you should be able to smoke a joint at night without the fear of the president executing you. Sorry to go off on a weird tangent here, but again, it's like, even with Trump, even somebody I support, you see if the people don't push back. If we don't use our free speech to say, hey, Trump, I understand your intention, but executing drug dealers is actually a super bad idea. Because in other countries, they just start randomly labeling anybody a drug dealer, even if you just give your friend a nug. And that's not the corrupt path we want to go down. But absolutely final thoughts and let people know where to find you.
Yes, so I'm on Instagram at Out of the Box Rosie. That's my podcast, Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran. And I'm on all other platforms at Funny Rosie. Thank you so much for having me, David. I
can't believe this has already been 42 minutes. I feel like we had to dive into so much more. Maybe we'll do one remotely.
Okay.
You down for that?
Yeah.
All right, so everybody can digest this one, and then we'll get into another one maybe in a month or two.